Hi, everyone. Welcome to this month's Graphic Arts Alliance webinar. We're really excited to be here with Jeremiah Vigil and Michael Vigil. They are here from Utility Audit based out of Arizona. And they're going to be talking about energy management and strategies to reduce utility costs. So this is a really good one, especially coming into the winter for those of you who are in the colder months or in the colder regions. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over. And just please, just a reminder, please keep yourselves muted throughout the course of this webinar. We're going to hold questions to the end. And at the end, I'll open it up for questions. You can put your questions in the chat or raise your hand. So without further ado, Jeremiah, thank you so much for joining us. We're really looking forward to hearing all about ways we can save on our energy costs. So take it away.
All right, Wendy, thank you so much for letting us be a part of this and looking forward to the next 30 minutes or so as we get to share some knowledge and information to all of your members and everyone at GAA. For all of you watching, my name's Jeremiah. I'm the VP of Operations here at Utility Audit. I've been doing this for about 14 years full time and loving every minute of it. Working alongside my father, who is Mike, and Mike, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you, Jeremiah. Thank you, Wendy. Really appreciate the opportunity. We're excited to be here. Myself, I started Utility Audit back in 1989, so I've been at it for about 35 years. And we just are, to our audience, this will be very eye-opening. It'll be very educational as well when it comes to utility, whether it's direct build or landlord build. But in either way, it will be very helpful. I'll turn it over to Jeremiah and you run with it, and I'll be happy to answer questions as we go.
Okay, well, thank you, Mike. We'll go ahead and jump right into it. Of course, this is energy management strategies to reduce utility costs. This is a portion of a class that we teach nationwide at the NRTA conference every year. And we selected this section of the class that we routinely do to kind of help you guys with your printing companies and your facilities nationwide. This is a high-level course where it's mostly just getting through a lot of fundamentals and elementary areas to help understand the process, because once we understand the process or the fundamentals with a lot of rate strategies and energy management, we can discover ways to save money long term. So we're going to focus on two areas here. The first one is going to be rates and rate comparisons for electric and gas. And then the second part of this webinar is going to be focusing on electric choice or transport gas in deregulated areas and ways that we could save money. A little bit deeper understanding of the process of where that whole deregulated versus regulated comes into play and how you could take advantage of that. So getting right into it, the first thing we want to do is, oh, my screen not moving. There we go. Is go over very basic understanding of the difference of the two types or two components of energy prices. So anytime you look at an electric bill, there's two main reasons why you're being billed, and they look the same, but they're not. One of them is demand, which is kW or kilowatts. The second being consumption, often known or labeled on your bill as kWh, which is kilowatt hours. All of our clients usually have a different paradigm of how kW versus kWh fits into your bill. The easiest way to think about this when you're looking at your utility bills for your facilities is to think of demand or kW as a water hose. And the bigger the water hose, the more water could go through it. Well, the water that goes through that water hose is the consumption, or the kWh, being the kilowatt hours. That's how much energy you're using. The utility company, they charge every client or every end user based off of the demand and then how much energy consumption you use. They have to, by law, by the PUC, which is a Public Utility Commission, reserve or set aside enough bandwidth or kW for your plant or your facility to have enough electricity to pool for all of your, printing machines, manufacturing machines, all of your equipment, HVAC, and all that. And then the water or the energy that goes through that demand is really what your consumption or your usage is. So with demand and consumption, that's kind of a nice, fun, easy way to kind of think about what's the difference, why you're being charged 5,000 a month for demand and then another 10,000 a month for kilowatt hours. They look the same, they seem the same, but they serve different purposes, but they're both required for that. We'll go ahead and move right on along. Um, Understanding those two main concepts will really lay a foundation for rates and rate comparisons. So what we do here every day is we identify, we verify, we find alternate rates, and then we do rate comparisons for our clients. And we like to teach our clients how to do this for themselves. So that's what we're going to do for you today, is teach you how to do this on your own. Alternately, or for the most part, identifying and verifying means that it's encouraged to look at your utility bills at a minimum once a year. And we ask you to do this, or we do this as a practice, because the rates change multiple times a year. There are different cost increases, different riders are available, different areas where you could save with pilot programs depending on your use and your region. So I know we're talking to a nationwide audience, so I can't just focus on one specific state or one specific PUC. So with generalized terms, your rates change multiple times throughout the year. So we encourage you to look at your rates, go to the vendor's website, explore the tariffs that are published, and the tariff is the piece of paper that the Public Utility Commission uh, says that your utility vendor can charge you. You know how much a rate XYZ would charge you for demand, and how much this rate would charge you for kilowatt hours or your reactive power and your kVAR and all those different types of components. Um, Really, and the best way to go about doing this is if your facility has a good 12-month to a 24-month historical usage, you could provide a report and do a really good side-by-side rate comparison based off of your real usage. So there's no guessing going along. Now, we always get this. A lot of people say, well, the utility will tell me what rate to be on. Well, they guess. And when you first start your services for your utilities, whether it's gas or electric, they're just going to put you on a rate that when you first initiate a contact with them, based off maybe a survey or based off of the type of use they think you're going to use, they put you on a rate. And it's up to the end user, which is you, to determine if you're on the best rate. They don't do it for you. They'll provide tools for you. They'll provide tariffs for you. They'll provide rate sheets for you. But at the end of the day, it's really not their responsibility to do it. The responsibility falls on the end user. So determine the best rate option for a full rate comparison, and that's highly encouraged. And to get into that, there's really 5 general types of rates that are available. Now, this all depends and it's relative to your facilities. So you might have many large facilities or just a whole bunch of little ones. And that pretty much puts you in the bucket of where you can find rate comparisons or rate alternatives within your utility vendor. 1 through 4, of course, small general service for something 1,500 square feet or less, medium, up to 3,000 square feet. This is typical use, it might vary depending on where you're at. There's large general service and then industrial service on those. And these are all types of commercial rates. Now, we're not talking about residential rates because that's a different animal. They're built differently, they're handled differently because a house pulls a lot less demand than a facility such as a printing machine that's working 24 hours a day. One thing that we want to really focus on and that we felt would be pretty beneficial for especially a printing type use company, where we assume usage is taking place, if not 24/7, most of the day. And that would be with time of use or time of day rate classes. Inside of every one of these 1 through 4, whether it's small, medium, large, or industrial, there's always typically a type of time of use or time of day rate option available for you in that bucket that you're put in based on your usage. And as we're going through this, I want to highlight number 5, which is the time of use or time of day. So this is really where rate types, where vendors, they charge you differently for your kilowatt hours and your demand based on when you're pooling or using the electricity during different times of the day. Time of use is not a new animal. It's not a new rate. However, many vendors have multiple types of time of use rates that are available. I'll give you an example. SDG&E in California, at any one, whether you're small, medium, or large, or industrial, every one of those categories has probably between 3 to 5 different types of time of use rates that are available for them. Time of use A, time of use, 1, time of use, there's different types, and every one of them really charge you differently based on when you use your usage. There's on peak, mid peak, off peak, and then in some cases, there's this thing called super off peak, which is a super big savings if you could use power during that time. Typically, they're broken down into these 3 to 4 different types of periods, and the prices vary. So just to kind of give you a better picture, going back to the very first diagram that we showed you with the comparison of of demand versus consumption, and I used the water hose as an example. The utility during on-peak hours has to make sure that that is the highest traffic time during the day for that specific region, state, city, or zip code. They have to make sure and guarantee that power is going to make it to the end user during those on-peak periods. Well, because those on-peak periods, that's when people usually get home from work or they're getting ready to leave for work, those very rare on-peak periods, they charge you more to use electricity because of it. They almost penalize you for using it because it's a high use, high demand uh, period of traffic. And then, logic states, going to mid peak, off peak, or super off peak, those are less demand periods where the utility will reward you in a sense by charging you less for your energy and for your demand usage. And, alternating and using demand management, which is another class we teach on how to effectively be more efficient by staggering your demand usages. Don't turning off your lights all at the same time, or turning on your lights at the same time, all of your equipment at the same time. If you could stagger things strategically based off of the times on these on-peak, mid-peak, off-peak hours, the savings are tremendous. On the surface, if we look, I just want to give you 2 really quick examples. This is a pretty basic medium-sized client. This is at LGE, and this is a Kentucky client that we had recently. They're spending about $30,000 to $40,000 a month on their utility bill. We did some side-by-side comparisons. There are several different options for a time of use rate. And we found that this one actually would have saved about $6,400 a month by switching to a time of use rate. Mike, if you could kind of go through the differences between the charges on peak and off peak, that would be helpful.
Yes, absolutely, Jeremiah. You see on the left-hand side, we've got a pre-audit power service where it's not being billed for the energy charge for the on and off peak periods. Whereas on the right side, the post-audit rate time of day secondary service, our energy charge is billed a peak demand, intermediate, and base demand. And those three periods that Jeremiah was referencing, the peak demand obviously is the highest, and then the intermediate and the base is less. But when those are the main components on the time of use. But at the end of the day, when you look at the pre and the post audit, the savings is about $6,400 here. Jeremiah mentioned about peak demand. Our past experiences with printing companies is an issue with peak demand. Here our KW is running about 860 or 840 peak KW. What's interesting is most printing companies will only reach their peak demand one time over a 30-day period, and you're being penalized for the remainder of the billing cycle. And that's because everything is flipped on all at one time. A great methodology for peak demand management is just to stagger, even if it's only for a 15-minute period. And there's timing devices that can be purchased from the utility company, which are very minimal at $25, maybe for a staggering device. And those can reduce an 850 kW down to about 550 kW just for that one little item alone. Hope
Yeah,
that
that's
Maya.
such solid advice on that. Um, what we do is we always track the savings. So I encourage, if you do this, do a rate comparison every month based off of your actual usages. So that way you can see at the end of the year how much you're actually saving. If you're at $6,000 a month, I mean, that's easily 72,000 plus a year that you're saving that you could be putting back into your organization. Um, with oh, my mouse isn't working here. Uh-oh. That is unfortunate. Give me 1 second, guys.
No, take your time.
Wendy, while Jeremiah is facilitating that, do we have any questions from the audience?
So if you have any questions, we are working on a quick technical issue here, but if there's any questions that you have thus far, I mean, we're definitely seeing some really good value in going back to the utility company and finding out how the rates are being structured for your organization. And I don't know if any of you have gone through that process already. If you've seen similar savings, I'd be curious to see that, and if any of you have learned more about your current utility company's offerings in that area. Looks like were you able to get it fixed,
We
Jeremiah?
are, yeah, and I'm sorry about that error.
No
And
worries.
yeah, I'm curious to see if you guys have been able to do this on your own and get any realized savings as a result. Some utilities do this a lot easier than others. So I just showed you on the previous slide, LG&E, and you have to do a rate comparison each month to see if you saved any money. Others, they do it pretty much for you. So if this is an SRP, this is Salt River Project in Arizona, they literally write it on your bill for you. They say, hey, you saved $300 this month just by going to a time of use type of plan. And you can see it highlighted on there. So some of them make it a little easier than others, but regardless, there's savings there. You just have to take the effort, take the time to go into it and do the history to make sure that you're, on the right rate. The other area that we wanted to go into, because all that we're talking about right now was for regulated states. And we wanted to get into the second part of the class, which is talking about electric choice and transport gas. Uh, it's common knowledge that there's regulated markets and there's deregulated markets. Really, just to go over real briefly, regulated markets, they hold control over the energy, which means it's almost like a small monopoly. One company gets the energy, they distribute the energy, and then they bill you. Whereas in a deregulated market, it's a similar pattern. However, the end user, being you, has the option to purchase its commodity through a third party, whether it's gas or electricity. So we'll get into that real quick. If you look at this map, As of 2024, all the blue states, those are where there's availability for deregulation with gas and electricity, depending on the area that you're in. If it's a green state, there's just natural gas options. If it's a dark gray, very limited ability, but if it's a light gray, it just means it's a regulated state, which means it's pretty much you have no choice where you get your electricity from. Really, in the last 20 years, this map hasn't changed. And anytime a new territory comes in, they just immediately get saturated with third-party brokers and third-party suppliers. But there's such a big advantage for the end user to choose what type of electricity they want to have. Uh, when we're looking at this, I realize for the sake of time, I'm a very visual person, so I want to give you the visual for yourself as well. So looking at what is deregulation, on the very top of the screen it says before, this is for a regulated state or a monopoly, as I like to call them. You know, there's the power plants and they make the energy. They make either whether it's gas or electricity, but for electricity, they make with nuclear, solar, wind, or just good old-fashioned coal, they make the electricity. The local distributing company, being your utility vendor, they take that electricity and they have an infrastructure already built in place. Those are the lines that go underground, overground, but at the end of the day, they deliver it to you, the end user. And you, the end user, pays that local company, the utility company, for their wonderful service of procuring energy and distributing it to you. In the second, on the bottom part, there's a fourth element, which is where you get to choose your supplier. The electricity is still being made, same way, nuclear, green energy, coal energy, regardless. And then you can decide who you want to purchase electricity from at a higher rate, lower rate, a fixed rate, an index, cost over index rate. And then from there, the local company, the same one that was in the area, the scenario before, still distributes it to you, the end user. And the reason why it's set up this way is because if all the third-party people had their own infrastructure, the skies would be cluttered with so many cables, the grounds would be littered with all the lines and infrastructure. So instead of having too many, I guess, cables in the sky, they just keep it with one local distribution company. So, but it still allows you to provide, I guess, a better strategic way of how you want to purchase your commodity for gas or electricity. We have a couple really good tools that we want to share with you. Uh, if you have your phone, get out the QR code or just take a note of this website. This is a U.S. Energy Information Administration, the EIA. Really, they have a lot of good resources, tips, and up-to-date statistics and information. Uh, they kind of give you a good area and a way for you to gauge on how much you're paying for electricity, things that are going to be coming up on the market. For example, this is looking at from June of 22 to June of 2024. We can look that, just by doing a quick search, Nevada had an increase, of 32%, but Louisiana had a decrease year over year of 12%. And you can kind of better gauge what your cost is. And when you're shopping for commodity agreements, to kind of see where the market value of your agreement is. If it's a good contract, then you could kind of compare it with these prices here. Another wonderful tool that we want to share with you is Electric Choice. What this is a snapshot, and again, there's a QR code there that you could scan and kind of browse through these websites. But this is from year over year as of September 24, and it gives every state the current cost of electricity in kilowatt hours per state, the average. You could use this information to better determine if one, you need to get on a supply agreement or just stay with your utility vendor altogether, or you could determine if A 12-month agreement is better than a 36-month agreement. These are helpful tools to just better prepare yourself for, the long-term effects of going into a third-party agreement. The price you pay for electricity really just depends on a lot of factors. Just because one state says that it's XYZ amount of money, it depends on the type of building. Remember the rate type, small, medium, large, industrial, time of use. All of those play a major factor into it. So just because this snapshot here or this website gives you what the average is in your state, still go to the local vendor, utility vendor, and look at their rates as well. There's 3 different types of uh, commodity agreements that you could get into. And I know you guys have done this before in the past, but typically there's fixed, there's indexed, and there's blended. Like I said before, I'm a visual person and I want to share with you a good way to look at fixed pricing. It's a basic graph, price over time. Fixed pricing means that at day one, you could lock in your price, and then for budgetary reasons, you know exactly how much you're going to pay for each kilowatt hour you use throughout the year. No matter what you do, whether it's a 12-month term or a 36-month term, the price is the same, and that helps. And that's encouraged, especially in some states. Another area is indexed pricing. And this pretty much shows you what those index pricing means that you get into an agreement with your third-party supplier and it's cost over index. The cost, the index, but whether it's gas or electricity, it goes up and down multiple times a day, not to mention every month. And as those months and days go forward, you're being charged a cost over index, which means that in some months you'll pay significantly less, but also in other months you might be paying a lot more. So it just depends on your risk tolerance within your organization and how comfortable you are taking advantage of that. One key reason why someone would choose an index pricing agreement versus a fixed pricing is if you just want to ride out the market for a short-term strategy, like for maybe 6 months or a year, just to see if the pricing goes down. There's a lot of changes taking place, in 25, and there's a lot of advantageous ways to look at getting into an index price if that's something you want to do. And the third one was blended. I don't have a visual chart for that, but it basically, like the term says, it's a blended contract where part of it is fixed and part of it is blended or indexed. And Mike, you might want to talk about this pro tip that we have here about going back to your LDC.
Yes, Jeremiah. One of the things to caution all of our audience when it comes to generation supply is the LDC, local distributing company, versus the supplier. The local distributing company will have what's called a price to beat. That's the price the tariff is to beat versus going to a third-party supplier. Historically, years ago, it was a no-lose situation by picking a third-party supplier, but that has changed quite a bit in the last 10 years, and it sometimes it's a roller coaster ride. We caution everybody going to a third-party supplier because you may spend more money than remaining with the utility company that you're with. And so we encourage you to get professional advice on that, on the price to beat versus third-party supply. Those are just some of the things we need to caution, our audience on that.
And one of the key factors for that is, local distributing companies like your utility vendor, they're purchasing in such large bulk that it's difficult to compete with that to a supplier when, we're just one facility or you only have 3 facilities, and it's difficult to be competitive in that market. So that's one of the reasons why I would say in the last 3 years, we've been recommending and seeing long-term savings by just getting off that regulate or the deregulated market, going back to your LDC and getting a more reliable and less volatile cost per electricity for kilowatt hours and therms for gas. Uh, Wendy, that concludes what we have for today. I know we're at 12:33, slightly earlier than we needed to be.
No, you're
But I'll
good.
go ahead and just flip it back over to you guys, see if there's any questions and something that we could help out with.
Absolutely, you got it. Well, this was a really great discussion, and I think there was a lot of really helpful pearls in here for our members. If you have any of the members have any questions that are logged in today, please feel free to put them in the chat. You can also just click on your raise hand option there, and you can unmute and ask your question. Um, while they're kind of thinking about some things to ask, I've talked to a couple of our members that have gotten on these programs where they have mandatory shutdowns during certain peak times. Have you seen things like that? Do you recommend getting on programs like that? How do those play out compared to getting into more of the peak, off peak, super off peak?
Wendy, this is Mike. Happy to answer that question. With mandatory shutdowns, you might be referring to a term called curtailment.
Mm-hmm.
Curtailment is an option with end users where the utility company, if you have a 500 kW, you curtail, let's say 100 kW during the peak blackout periods.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice that you receive credits, but it's also not nice in that you have to cut back 100 kW. Most printing companies and manufacturers are not able to curtail, 20 or 30% of their load. And so, you have to caution, when those options come to the table. But they are available, yes.
Yeah, and they do that to avoid the rolling blackouts that take place, especially in the heat of the summer.
Mm-hmm.
The and the reason why they do that is the utility vendors start seeing on their load chart, oh no, we don't have enough demand to provide everybody. We're going to have to start pulling it from somewhere else. And then they ask the end user, hey, can you stop using electricity so we can still provide to other people? And if you have a backup generator, batteries, that's where those play really significantly to where you can take advantage of it. One thing to caution you, like Mike was saying, a lot of manufacturers and printing companies, they can't afford to turn off a printer
Yeah.
for 3 hours during the day. And if you get called a curtailment time period, from 2 to 3, but you can't turn it off, they'll actually penalize you because you didn't do what you agreed to do with your rate. So just be careful with that.
Okay, I was wondering about that because I have heard about these things. Some folks getting onto programs like that, and they have touted kind of some good savings, but I had wondered what the drawbacks were and what your opinion was on that compared to just getting on a standard. Hey, we'll take the rate based on the peak time, off time, and kind of roll that way as opposed to getting on these curtailment programs. So that's extremely helpful. Thank you. If
Sure.
anyone else has questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Another question I've always had, so in Pennsylvania, we're in a deregulated state, and there are a number of options to get on different energy sources, like wind. Wind is a big one actually here. And so obviously they're having to go through your utility provider, the generator, all the lines and everything. This is kind of a naive question maybe, but how are they, ultimately, I guess they're just taking what you would normally use and they're putting that into the pool to say like your $6,000, $20,000 a month, we're going to buy wind power with and just throw it into the mix. That's kind of essentially what's happening?
Yeah.
Wendy, this is Mike. I'll go ahead and start on that one, Jeremiah. Green energy is a big news item in the utility industry today. But the first thing that everyone needs to remember is wind and solar it's going to cost you anywhere from 2 to 3 times higher than fossil fuel with the LDC tariff rates. There's pros and cons to it. There are tax advantages. It's also nice to let your customers know, hey, we're green. But it will cost you, 2 to 3 times higher. You can you can percentage the amount of wind and solar. Let's say you're 30% solar, 20% wind, and 50% fossil. A lot of people take that methodology.
Mm.
But however, at the end of the day, you're going to pay more,
Okay.
no matter how you slice it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought too. I mean, I know certainly the green options have become available in a number of states, but there is a premium to that, and I think it just depends on the stakeholders of your organization to see, okay, how important is this? How important is this to the company in terms of the company's corporate values and the stakeholders and all of that. So thank you. And Jeremiah, I think you had some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I was gonna pretty much echo what Mike said. Um, some states, I'll pick on California for one. There's a CCA, and they pretty much put all of their clients, end users, on pretty much a third-party agreement with them knowing or without them knowing about it. And the reason they did that is so they could put into place green initiatives, which is a good thing. And for a while, the state supplemented the added cost of green energy with some of these suppliers. And recently, we're starting to see where some of those the help from the state is going away, and the bills are getting higher and higher. And like
Mhm.
Mike was saying, you could do a blend. You could do 50% green, 50% fossil if that's something you really want to do. We always get we're hired through our clients to reduce the bill. And so we'll bring someone to the table of an identified event and say, hey, you're 100% green. You could save 100,000 by just going back to fossil fuels. And while that's good, they have an initiative internally with their board members, board of directors, or with their annual reporting to their end users that they have to stay at a certain percentage of green energy. And so they're unable to save money, but they're still, maintaining their goals
Tied
at the
in,
end of the
yeah, makes sense. Very helpful. Thank you. I know we are about 40 minutes in now. So if there are any other questions from the members, I'm curious if anyone has gone through this exercise of, kind of assessing some of your utility costs. If anyone would be wanting to very quickly share an experience that you've had, certainly we'd love to hear from our members on how you've kind of navigated these situations. If anyone would like to raise their hand, you can unmute yourself. Because it is, we're coming, especially in the colder regions I mentioned, we are coming into the colder months, and where there's definitely the heating bills are high, and in the summer, naturally, especially with a lot of equipment, there has to be climate controlled zones that require the air conditioning. So there's those two kind of areas, especially in the summer, where this is really a very relevant conversation for our members. And I have spoken to some of our members over the years that have kind of navigated this, either through, kind of an audit process or through their own, just calling up their utility company and just trying to get better rates. Some have been more successful than others, but yeah. Well, in the interest of time, I'm going to just jump on here for a second. In the interest of time, I just want to thank both of you very much for joining us today and providing all this information. For those of you who have not heard of Utility Audit or worked with Utility Audit, they are actually one of our Graphic Arts Alliance vendor partners. So they do offer programs to our members. They have some special programs that they can offer our members for doing the whole assessment for your company. So please do give Jeremiah and Mike a call. They're fantastic to work with, and they'll be able to help you out in terms of getting those utility costs, not just utility, but I know that they work on other areas as well, in the whole kind of spectrum of those operational costs that oftentimes we just kind of keep paying those bills and forget about them because we've got to buy paper and ink and all those other important things and keep the presses maintained. So, but these costs can add up very quickly in the bottom line. So please, like I said, consider Utility Audit. They are a phenomenal partner of GAA's. Give Mike and Jeremiah a call. Here's all of their information, and don't hesitate to reach out to myself as well if you have any questions. So without further ado, thank you both again for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful holiday season.
You as well. Thanks for having us.
Take care.